This story is titled, My Golden Brother Cheated with My Wife and Tried to Drain My Saving, and my mom sided with them. So I did this, and it destroyed their life. What's up, people? Long-time lurker, first-time poster here. I've always thought of myself as a guy who's got his shit together. But lately, I'm starting to question everything. My marriage, my family, and maybe even my own judgment. Feels like I'm living in some kind of twisted drama I never signed up for. Let me lay it out and see if you think I'm crazy. So here's the deal. I've, 28 male, been married to Claire, 27 female, for 2 years. We had what I thought was a solid thing going. I'm not the guy who needs some perfect romantic fairy tale. I've built a good life for myself, a solid career, a nice house, and a vision for the future. And Claire fit into that perfectly. She's smart, funny, and sharp enough to keep me on my toes. We worked well together, like a team. I didn't think I'd ever have to second guess her. She wasn't just my wife. She was my partner in every sense of the word. I still remember the way she stood by me when I missed out on a promotion I'd been gunning for. "You'll get the next one," she said, her hand resting on mine. "You're unstoppable." I believed her then. Now, I don't know who she is anymore. Then there's James, 27 male, my younger brother. The guy is basically the poster boy for charm. Growing up, he was the favorite. Everyone loved him, and he knew how to milk it. Teachers, girlfriends, even our parents. It was always James this, James that. Meanwhile, I was the guy grinding away, actually earning my way. But I'm not bitter. Okay, maybe a little. However, growing up, James and I were inseparable. He wasn't just my brother. He was my best friend. We'd spend summers building forts, taking the blame for each other's trouble, and protecting each other from the world. Sure, James was always the golden boy, our parents' favorite, but it didn't matter back then. We had each other. That's why this betrayal cuts so deep. When Claire and I got married, James got along with her right away, which didn't bother me. Family is family. He'd show up to hang out, crack jokes, be his usual entertaining self. I figured Claire just saw him as my fun-loving brother. Nothing more. She's way too smart to fall for his smooth talker crap, and James knows better than to mess with my life. Or at least I thought he did. But then, James started showing up more. Not just for family dinners or casual weekend beers, normal stuff. I'm talking midweek pop-ins when I wasn't home. I'd come back from work and Claire would casually say, "Oh, James stopped by for lunch." At first I ignored it off. Cool, I guess? But then it started happening a lot. One evening I came home early and found them on the couch, laughing over something on her phone. Claire noticed me and immediately locked her screen, her smile fading. My gut sank. I didn't say anything, no point without proof. But the way she avoided eye contact stayed with me. Later that night, I tried to play it cool. "So, what was so funny earlier with James?" I asked. Claire shrugged. "Oh, just a meme. Nothing serious." I let it go, but my radar was going off like crazy. Something didn't feel right. The next day, I decided to test the waters. Over dinner, I casually said, "James has been around a lot lately. Doesn't he have better things to do?" Claire rolled her eyes and laughed. "He's your brother. Don't be so dramatic. He just likes hanging out." That answer didn't sit right with me. People don't just like hanging out with married couples for no reason. But I kept my cool. There's no point in flying off the handle when you don't have the full picture. I'm not a guy who runs his mouth without backing it up. Looking back, I can see the cracks in Claire's demeanor that I ignored. She'd been restless lately, talking about wanting more out of life, feeling trapped. I thought I was doing enough, but maybe I wasn't. Maybe James stepped in where I fell short. Not that it excuses what they did. It just makes me wonder if she was searching for something, anything, to fill whatever void she thought she had. That night, I called Eric, my best friend since college. If anyone could help me sort through this mess, it was him. "You're overthinking it," Eric said at first, his voice calm and measured. "James is annoying, sure, but he's your brother. Claire's smart. She wouldn't cross a line like that." "I don't know, man," I replied. "There's something about the way they've been acting. It's too familiar." Eric paused, then sighed. "Okay, let's say you're not imagining things. What are you going to do about it?" "I don't know yet," I admitted. "But if I find out they're crossing the line, they're both out of my life." "Good," Eric said firmly. "You don't deserve that kind of betrayal. Keep your eyes open, and whatever you do, don't let them make you feel crazy. Trust your gut." Then came the barbecue party. A harmless family get-together, or so I thought. We were all in the backyard, grilling burgers, when one of my cousins made a joke. "Man, Claire and James are like two peas in a pod." Everyone laughed, but my jaw tightened. It wasn't just me seeing it anymore. Other people noticed. That's when I realized this wasn't just in my head. Since then, I've been watching. Not obsessively. I'm not some insecure boy who needs to check his wife's every move, but I'm not blind either. The way they exchange these subtle glances, the little inside jokes I'm not in on, the way Claire always defends him whenever I bring it up, it's all adding up. For now, I've been letting them think I'm clueless, playing the long game. But deep down, I know this won't end well. And if they think I'm going to just sit back and watch this happen, they've got another thing coming. By this point, I knew I needed help. I didn't just want to catch them. I wanted to make sure I had every angle covered. That's when I called up a buddy of mine, Mark, who's a beast in family law. The guy's a shark in a suit, and I knew he'd have my back. He's not just any lawyer. He's a family friend who's seen it all, and he's damn good at his job. Something's off, I told him what I've been suspecting, although it hurts to tell others that you feel you're being betrayed by your brother and wife, Zrenia, but I needed help and didn't want to play dirty. I don't have much yet, but my gut says they're hiding something. Mark didn't ask for details. He's not the type to waste time on speculation. You get me the proof, he said, his voice steady. Then we'll figure out how to handle it. Let me make one thing clear. I'm not the kind of man who tolerates disrespect. You can call it old school, but loyalty is the line you don't cross. Ever. So, when things with Claire and James started feeling off, I didn't sit back and hope for the best. I don't wait for the storm to pass. I walk straight into it. And this storm? It had been brewing for too damn long. The opportunity to act came when I had to leave town for work. Or at least, that's what I let Claire think. I packed my bag and told her I'd be gone for 3 days. But instead of heading to the airport, I checked into a hotel across town. It wasn't paranoia. It was strategy. If there was something going on, I needed to see it with my own eyes. Words and assumptions mean nothing. Proof is everything. The first day was quiet. Claire texted me throughout, keeping up the act like everything was normal. "Miss you," she wrote. "Hope work's not too stressful." I almost laughed. She was good, I'll give her that. But I've learned over the years that the people who lie the best always trip themselves up eventually. By the second day, my instincts were rewarded. Around noon, I got an alert from the tracking app I'd quietly installed on her phone. Yeah, I know how it sounds, but trust me. When the stakes are this high, you don't leave things to chance. She wasn't at home. She wasn't at the grocery store or anywhere she'd usually be. She was at James's apartment. I don't remember feeling anger in that moment. What I felt was colder, like everything in me sharpened into focus. I gripped the steering wheel, waiting for them to emerge. Not because I needed more proof, but because I needed to see how far this would go. If Claire and James were crossing a line, I wasn't going to let them pretend otherwise. An hour later, they left his place together. Her laugh echoed down the street as they walked to his car, like she didn't have a care in the world. James was grinning like he was on top of it all. My brother, my wife, they thought they'd gotten away with it. I followed them to a coffee shop, parked across the street, and watched. The way they sat there, leaning in close, talking like no one else existed. It wasn't innocent. Her hand brushed his arm at one point, and my chest tightened. Not from hurt, from the sheer burning realization that these two had the audacity to disrespect me like this. My camera app clicked as I took photos, each one a nail in the coffin of whatever they thought they could get away with. But something didn't add up. It wasn't just the sneaking around. It was the way Claire had been withdrawing small amounts of cash from our accounts over the past few months. At first, I thought it was just her usual spending, but the pattern felt deliberate. Mark confirmed my suspicions 2 days later. "The money's been funneled into an account that doesn't belong to either of them," he said during one of our calls. "It's under the name Victor Kane." "Who the hell is Victor Kane?" I asked. "He's trouble," Mark said bluntly. "Scammed people out of thousands through fake investment deals. He's been flagged for fraud multiple times, but he's slippery. No convictions yet. It looks like he's roped James into one of his schemes. And your wife? She's been funding it, whether she knows it or not." My stomach turned. This wasn't just an affair anymore. James and Claire weren't just betraying me. They were being played. And now, my money was tangled up in whatever game that Victor Schott was running. That was a lot to handle. Everything swirled like a storm in my mind, but I had to face things step by step to understand the shit that's happening in my life. The next day, I walked into my house earlier than expected. Claire was at the kitchen counter, sipping her coffee, her phone in hand. She looked up and froze for half a second before forcing a smile. "You're back early. How was the trip?" I dropped my bag by the door and leaned against the wall, arms crossed. Cut short. Figured I'd surprise you. She laughed, but there was an edge to it. Well, that's great. I nodded, not saying much. I wanted her to feel the silence. Let her stew in it. Claire doesn't handle silence well. It makes her nervous. Sure enough, she started babbling about her day, trying to fill the void. I just watched her, calm and steady. Then I made my first move. So how's James been lately? I asked, my tone casual, like I was asking about the weather. Her spoon froze midair. Fine, I guess. Why? No reason. Just seems like you two have been spending a lot of time together. Her eyes narrowed slightly. Are you really doing this again? He's your brother. Yeah, I said, leaning back in my chair. My brother. Funny how that works. Her jaw tightened. You're being paranoid. You've been working too much. Maybe you should take a break. I smiled, but it wasn't a kind one. Maybe I should. She didn't see it coming when I pulled out my phone and slid it across the table. The photos were right there, plain as day. Her and James at the coffee shop, laughing, leaning in too close. The blood drained from her face as she stared at the screen. It's not what it looks like, she stammered. Classic line. Predictable. I tilted my head. So what is it then? Because it looks like my wife and my brother are sneaking around behind my back. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. Just tears. Big, dramatic ones. The kind meant to manipulate. But I wasn't moved. Not anymore. Save it, I said, my voice low and steady. I gave you the benefit of the doubt for weeks. I trusted you. And this is how you repay me? Nothing happened, she cried. We were just talking. Talking, I repeated, leaning forward. At his apartment. At a coffee shop. When you thought I wasn't around. That's some interesting talking. She tried to deny it again, but the words rang hollow. She knew she was caught. That night, I packed a bag. Claire begged me to stay, saying we could work it out. But there's no working things out with someone who's willing to betray you like that. Trust doesn't grow back once it's broken. As I drove away, something shifted in me. The old version of myself, the one who trusted too easily, who believed in loyalty without question, was gone. What replaced him was sharper, harder, the kind of man who doesn't let things slide. If Claire and James thought this was over, they were dead wrong. Ice or tea? I didn't pack my bag and walk out of that house to sulk. I left because I needed distance to plan my next move. I'm not the guy who lets emotions take the wheel. Every step I took after that was calculated, deliberate. They thought they'd gotten away with it, that I'd back down. But I've never backed down from a fight in my life. And I wasn't about to start now. The day after I left, I laid everything out to Mark. The photos, the tracking app logs, and the way Claire couldn't even look me in the eye after I confronted her. Mark's the kind of guy who loves tearing people apart in court, and when I handed him that evidence, his grin told me I was in good hands. This isn't just an affair, Mark said, flipping through the photos I'd taken. It's calculated, premeditated. He was right. The way they moved, the secrecy, the lies. It wasn't just a betrayal. It was a scheme. And when Mark suggested digging deeper, I didn't hesitate. If there was more to uncover, I wanted it all laid bare. The more I thought about it, the more I realized this wasn't just about an affair. James had always been jealous of my career, my house, my life. He used to joke about it, but now I wondered if it was more than a joke. And Claire? She'd mentioned feeling stuck once or twice, but let it slide. Maybe I should have paid more attention. Maybe she wanted something more than I could give her. Or maybe this was just who they were. Two people willing to destroy someone else to get what they wanted. While Mark got to work, I focused on James. He was the key to this whole thing. Claire's betrayal stung, but James, my brother, that cut deeper. It wasn't just about the affair. It was the sheer audacity of him thinking he could steal from me. Because that's what this was about. I wasn't just dealing with infidelity. They were planning to take what I'd built, piece by piece. The breakthrough came 2 days later. Mark called me with a new piece of the puzzle, financial irregularities in our joint accounts. Claire had been quietly withdrawing money, small amounts at first, then larger sums. Mark had tracked the transfers to a hidden account, one with James's name on it. That's not the worst of it, Mark said. There's a trail of messages between her and James. They're talking about cleaning you out completely. It hit me like a freight train, but not in the way you'd think. I wasn't shocked. I wasn't hurt. I was furious. They weren't just sneaking around. They were plotting to rob me blind, to leave me with nothing. And for what? So they could play house together while I picked up the pieces? I was tripping and my lack of sleep was starting to show. At work, my boss pulled me aside after a meeting. You've been distracted lately, he said. What's going on? I wanted to tell him everything. That my wife and brother were tearing my life apart. That my finances were a mess. But instead, I just nodded and promised to get back on track. Work was the only thing I had left, and even that felt like it was slipping through my fingers. My friends were noticing too. "You've been quiet lately," one of them texted. "Everything okay?" I didn't reply. I wasn't going to confront Claire again. She'd made her choice, and there was no saving her. But James? He hadn't seen me yet, hadn't faced what was coming. He'd been hiding like the coward he is, but that wouldn't last. Before I confronted James, I did more digging. Mark sent me a summary of Victor Kane's operations. He preyed on people like James, desperate for easy money and too arrogant to see the red flags. According to Mark, Victor had promised James a risk-free deal, gain access to a significant amount of cash, invested in one of Victor's ventures, and double the money within months. All James had to do was convince someone to bankroll him, and that's where Claire came in. Whether James manipulated her or she went along willingly, I didn't care. They'd both betrayed me, and now they were neck-deep in a scam that could ruin everything I'd built. I had to confront James, but before heading to his apartment, I stopped by Eric's place. "You're really going to confront him?" he asked. "I have to," I said, my jaw tightening. "Just don't lose your cool," he warned. "You're better than this. Don't let their betrayal define you." The next evening, I drove to his apartment. I didn't call ahead, didn't knock softly. I pounded on his door until he opened it, his face pale when he saw me standing there. "Can we talk?" he stammered, already trying to backpedal. I slammed the door behind me. "You've got one chance," I said, stepping closer. "Tell me the truth. Now." James's face drained of color. "Look, man, it's not what you think. Don't lie to me." I leaned in, my voice sharp. "I've got photos, tracking logs, bank transfers. You think I don't know about the hidden account?" James froze, his hands trembling. I took a step closer, towering over him. "You knew exactly what you were doing. You didn't just sleep with my wife. You tried to take everything I've worked for. Did you think I wouldn't find out? Did you think I'd just roll over and take it?" James's hands shook as he held them up defensively. "It wasn't my idea. Claire, she..." "Don't!" I growled. "Don't you dare try to pin this on her like you're some innocent bystander. You were in on it. Every damn step of the way." He opened his mouth to argue, but I didn't give him the chance. I reached into my jacket and pulled out a copy of the bank statements Mark had uncovered. I tossed them onto his coffee table. "See that? That's your name on the account. That's you stealing from me, planning to leave me with nothing. You're not just a liar, James. You're a thief." He tried to sputter some excuse, but I wasn't listening anymore. I leaned in, my voice low and steady. "You've got one chance. Tell me about Victor Kane." And for the first time, he didn't try to smirk or deny anything. I don't know what you're talking about," he stammered. I stepped closer, my tone dropping to a growl. "Don't lie to me, James. I know about the account. I know about the money. Victor's not your business partner. He's a con artist. And you? You're too stupid to see you're just another pawn in his game." James's hands shook as he held them up defensively. "It wasn't supposed to go this far," he said. "Victor said it was just an investment, something to get ahead. Claire wanted in. She thought it was a good idea, too." I snapped. "You brought him into our lives. You dragged her into this mess. And now you're going to tell me everything, or I'll make sure Victor knows you've turned on him." James's eyes widened, and for a moment, I saw genuine fear. "You don't know what he's capable of," he whispered. "If he finds out I screwed up, that's not my problem," I said sharply. "You made this mess. You clean it up." And I left him in chaos. 2 days later, my mom called me. "I heard what happened," she said. Her voice was calm, too calm, like she was trying to smooth things over. "James is your brother. Families fight, but we forgive each other." I couldn't believe it. "Forgive him?" I asked. "He slept with my wife. He tried to steal from me. He's going through a rough time," she continued, as if I hadn't spoken. "He didn't mean for things to get so bad." "Don't call me again about this," I said, hanging up before she could reply. For once in my life, I wasn't playing the peacemaker. Walking out of James's apartment wasn't the end of the story. It was just the beginning of the fallout. Betrayal like this doesn't just disappear. It leaves scars. Deep ones. The first thing I did was lock down every financial loose end. If they thought they were clever, they had no idea who they were dealing with. I wasn't about to let Claire or James walk away with a dime of what I'd earned. With Mark, my lawyer and the best weapon in my arsenal, I froze our joint accounts. Claire had been sneaking money out for months, and Mark tracked it all. The withdrawals, the hidden account, every shady transfer. "Good news," Mark told me, his voice smug over the phone. "That account is frozen too. They can't touch it." I grinned. Step 1, complete. But just when I thought I had everything under control, I got hit with another curveball. My boss called me into his office. "Your numbers are slipping," he said. "What's going on?" I opened my mouth to explain. But what was I supposed to say? That my wife and brother were conspiring against me? That my personal life was a mess? Instead, I nodded and promised to refocus. The last thing I needed was for their betrayal to cost me my career too. So I decided to move everything into secure accounts under my name only. No ties to Claire, no way for her to siphon anything else. By the time they figured out what had happened, they were completely locked out. No money, no way to access anything I owned, and no idea how to fix it. That's when I hit her with the divorce papers. Mark didn't just draft a standard set of documents. He built a case so airtight, Claire would have no choice but to sign. Thanks to the evidence of her affair and her attempts to steal from me, she had no leverage. No chance of getting a single penny more than she was entitled to, which, as far as I was concerned, was nothing. When the papers landed on her doorstep, she called me immediately. Her voice was shaking, part anger, part desperation. "You're divorcing me?" she hissed, like it was some shocking betrayal. "You can't just throw everything away like this." I almost laughed at her audacity. "Throw everything away?" I said. "Claire, you did that the second you started sneaking around with James. The second you decided to take what wasn't yours. I'm just cleaning up the mess you made." She tried to guilt trip me. That's what Claire does best. She brought up the years we'd spent together, the good times, as if that erased everything else. "We can fix this," she said, her voice cracking. "We can work through it." I cut her off. "No, we can't. You don't come back from this. Sign the papers, Claire, or don't. Either way, we're done." I hung up before she could respond. There was nothing left to say. Next, it was James's turn. Getting him fired from his cushy job was a good start, but it wasn't enough. He thought he could coast on his charm forever, but I was about to make sure no one in his professional circle trusted him again. I reached out to a few contacts, people who knew James but didn't owe him anything, and laid out the truth. I didn't exaggerate or embellish. I just told them exactly what he'd done. The affair, the stolen money, the betrayal. I even sent them some of the evidence Mark had collected. Now James tried to interview for other jobs, but word spread quickly. No one wanted to hire a man who would betray his own brother. A week later, James called me. It was the first time I'd heard from him since our confrontation at his apartment. His voice was frantic, a mix of anger and desperation. "I can't get a job," he said, his voice rising. "You've ruined my reputation." I leaned back in my chair, letting his words hang in the air. "You ruined your reputation, James. I just made sure people knew the truth." "Come on, man," he pleaded. "We're family." That word, family, set something off in me. "You don't get to use that word. You stopped being family the second you decided to stab me in the back." "I didn't mean for it to go this far," he said, his tone shifting to pathetic. "I was stupid. I made a mistake." "A mistake is forgetting to lock your car," I shouted. "What you did was calculated. You knew exactly what you were doing, and now you're paying for it. Don't call me again, James. We're done." I hung up and blocked his number. Whatever came next for him wasn't my problem, but dealing with them wasn't enough. I needed to rebuild. For too long, I'd let Claire's lies and James's betrayal consume me. Now, I was done with that. I started hitting the gym harder than ever. Every rep, every mile, every drop of sweat felt like taking back control. I focused on work, diving into projects I'd put off for months. I reconnected with friends I hadn't seen in years, people I'd let drift away because I'd been too wrapped up in Claire's bullshit. It wasn't just about keeping busy. It was about proving to myself that I could move forward, that I could be better, sharper, stronger. Every step I took away from them was a step toward a better version of me. I also reconnected with old friends, people I'd drifted away from while trying to make my marriage work. Eric said something that stuck with me. "You're not the guy I used to know, but in a good way. You're sharper, stronger." It felt good to hear that, like I was finally becoming the person I was meant to be. By the time the divorce was finalized, Claire had gone radio silent. She signed the papers without a fight, probably realizing she had no other choice, and disappeared. No more texts, no more calls. She knew she'd lost. James? He slunk off into the shadows too. Last I heard, he'd moved out of town, probably hoping to escape the mess he'd made. Good. Let him run. Let him try to start over somewhere else. I didn't care anymore. They were ghosts to me now. Victor Kane wasn't finished with them, though. Mark found out that Victor had been pressuring James and Claire for more money after the account was frozen. Victor doesn't just let people walk away, Mark told me. He'll squeeze them dry before cutting them loose. Part of me wanted to warn them, but I stopped myself. They'd chosen to work with him. They'd chosen to betray me. If Victor turned on them, that was their problem. not mine. Still, it was satisfying to imagine James and Claire scrambling to clean up the mess they'd created. Looking back, it's hard to describe how all of this changed me. I don't trust as easily anymore, but I don't see that as a bad thing. Trust is earned, not given. And loyalty? That's not just expected, it's required. Claire and James thought they could tear me down, but all they did was remind me who I really am. So here I am now, sharper, stronger, smarter. They tried to burn me, but all they did was light a fire under me. If there's one thing I've learned, it's this. You can lose everything, but as long as you don't lose yourself, you can rebuild. And I'll be damned if I let anyone try to take me down again. But I'm actually curious about how their lives will turn out after the mess they left behind. If I figure anything new, I'll spill the tea here. Stay tuned. All right, everyone, before we dive into the final update, I have a small request. We put a lot of effort into finding these incredible stories for you every single day, and your support means the world to us. If you enjoy our content, please consider subscribing to the channel. It really helps us grow and allows us to continue bringing you more amazing stories. Thank you. Now let's move to the last update. Final update. Hey everyone, it's been a while. A lot has happened since my last post, and I figured it was time for an update. The financial fallout for my brother James didn't stop with the frozen account. Remember how Claire and James tried to set up that secret stash of stolen money? Well, the bank flagged the transfers, and since they were tied to fraudulent activity, both of them got hit with hefty fines. Claire managed to scrape together enough to pay her share, probably sold everything she could. But James? He didn't have the funds. From what I've heard, he's been struggling to make the payments, and is now dealing with debt collectors. The irony is almost poetic. He tried to take what wasn't his, and now he's drowning in bills he can't pay. Oh, and I recently found out through mutual contacts that James has officially left town. Apparently, he couldn't handle the shame of what he'd done and decided to start fresh somewhere else. Honestly, I think it's for the best. He burned every bridge here, professionally, personally, and within our family. The funny thing? Even though he's gone, his reputation is still following him. People talk, and his actions have become the kind of story that spreads fast. Wherever he goes, he's going to have to carry the weight of what he did. If you'd asked me a few months ago how I felt about James, I would have said I hated him. But now, I don't feel anything. He's just irrelevant. I don't need revenge or closure or any of that. I've moved on, and I've built a life where his existence doesn't matter anymore. That's the best part about karma. It doesn't need help. It takes care of things on its own. All I had to do was step back and let it do its work.